Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. On the program, getting down to business, we talk the fallout from the budget for the rural sector, the winners and the losers. Is there much to get excited about? Encouraging some of our best and brightest young people into the primary sector. Does the government need to step up? And National Field Days looming large at Mystery Creek, an annual barometer of farmer confidence. So what's the forecast? My guests this week from Waikato University's Institute of Business Research, Agribusiness Professor Stuart Locke, welcome, and the editor of National Business Review, Nevil Gibson. Gentlemen, not a lot of surprises in the budget this year. What has it delivered for the rural sector, good and bad? Stuart?
It's hard to see that it's really said very much at all, I think. It's fairly neutral. We have noticed a shift of intention, moving money away from certain areas in the university into the science faculties and engineering faculties, which may be a good way of sending quality immigrants to Australia. I'm not sure. I just think it's fairly neutral and doesn't show a lot of depth at all.
Nevil?
Well, there's a lot of tinkering around the edges, moving money around, but there was no substantial cuts in the budget at all, so you could say that probably a lot of that wastage is going to continue. That big ticket items like interest-free loans for students and the super scheme are not tackled. On the other hand, changing those priorities is not enough to excite any particular sector, I don't think, and there's always a few negatives, and that was in the tax area where there's a little bit more tax collecting, and that has affected the rural sector in the area of stock retention.
Is the rural sector right to possibly be aggrieved that maybe there wasn't more in it for them?
Well, I think people look to the budget for a bit of a lead on where the country should be going as far as the government's concerned. But on the other hand, it's not the government that drives the economy. So that lead is missing because there's no real strategic sort of plan to change the orientation of the economy. And I think there's a lot lacking there. Certainly economists would like to see a lot more activity in that area, and of course business would too, because essentially the government's got to create an environment where business is going to invest in new products, new markets and that sort of thing, and there was no evidence of that.
What sort of encouragement do you think, Stuart, there was for the primary sector? I mean, would they have been expecting a lot more from the government?
Well, I think they might have expected more, but in this current climate, we've been talking about a global financial crisis since 2007, and we continue to see the meltdowns in Europe and slowing production in China and so on. It does seem to me that the government has said, well, steady as we go. Let's not do a whole lot. The economy has been resilient, even as the share market slid over the last couple of days internationally. The new NZX held up with, and they're saying it's the money from Kiwi savers and local investors, overseas investors bringing money in, viewing New Zealand as relatively safe. So I think from a strategic position, the government was probably doing all right, but it's not actually going to shift anything. And without shift, we're not going to get that productivity gains that are going to help us catch up with Australia and with the rest of the world. We'll continue just to slide down the OECD in terms of living standards.
Stuart's correct. The main threats to the budget are external, and one of the main threats, of course, is that the growth predicted doesn't come through, and that'll affect government revenue. It'll lead to a larger deficit, and only by reducing the deficit will the borrowing costs of the country, and we'll get back that credit rating that we lost last year.
Which is crucial.
Well, it is for the business community and for investors in New Zealand.
Horticulture New Zealand has expressed disappointment biosecurity didn't even get a mention in the budget. Is this a crucial issue the government should have addressed? Especially given, we've had the Queensland fruit fly scare, the devastation wrought by PSA and the kiwi fruit industry, and fears currently over the raw pork meat imports. There's a lot of concern out there. We've got a global reputation to protect. Is the government doing enough on that count?
Well, I'm not an expert in this area, but I always get a bit worried that sometimes there's vested interest in this, and that's mainly jobs in the public sector. And in fact, the biosecurity caught the fruit fly, and there was not a danger, so that system's working. It doesn't need a whole lot more people put into jobs, which might be quite useless. And as far as the pork imports go, that's more to do with international trade and our obligations there than any threat from a disease, because people apply these things against us as well. So the more we talk about that, the more likely we are to be hit by other countries.
Any thoughts on that, Stuart?
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to see what's sort of going on behind the scene. They talk about profiling and better recognition of people who might be doing the wrong thing, bringing stuff in. But biosecurity for an agriculturally based country like ours is huge. I mean, varroa mite, 12 years, managed to get down to Invercargill. I don't think Shadbolt was waving a flag when they arrived. We had the Khaleesi virus introduction by farmers who weren't happy that the then primary industry was taking forever to reach a decision. So another bad move. We introduced a strain that just hasn't worked, so we can go back and watch the carpet at Mackenzie Country move now if we wish to for a holiday break. And PSA, I mean, what's the story there? It's going to take a while for that to come out. We've caught a number of growers who have been injecting streptomycin into their plants, and people are saying, oh, well, they've probably been punished enough. I just think we don't have a clear understanding of the huge damage that things like that do. And, if there's got to be solidarity amongst growers that we don't want to punish our own, well, that to my mind, just wrecks our international reputation.
Stuart, what about the impact on research? The kiwi fruit one obviously came from China and was done through research samples and that sort of thing. And at the other end, the scientists say they want to have more plant products coming in so we can keep up with overseas products. Obviously, there's quite a bit of tension in those sort of issues.
I think huge tension, and we see that, I suppose, best in the whole GM debate of what we can and can't bring in. Have we got adequate quarantine facilities that will pass those tests, or are we exposing ourselves to danger? And these are the sorts of issues I think the general public is just not in a position to understand. It's too easy to take one polar view and be green, keep the whole lot out, and we get people that say that. Others will say, if we don't do this, we're going to fall so far behind the rest of the world that our living standards will continue to decline. And I think we just need a lot more information. And did we see a science vote that was putting money there? I missed it. Did you see it in the small print?
No, there wasn't. No. That was certainly one of the issues Karen raised at the beginning. But I wonder if the real solution to that and getting more young people into science and farming is actually, and it is starting to happen, is to pay them higher salaries, because that's about the best incentive for anyone going to university.
We'll talk about that in a moment. Coming up, the rural extravaganza that is National Field Days. Will farmers be spending up large or keeping the purse strings tight this year? Hello, I'm Karen McCarthy and you're back with Straight Talk, and our guests Nevil Gibson and Dr. Stuart Locke. You're just talking about young people then and science, and I'm just wondering about anything in the budget to drive innovation in the rural sector and to increase the supply of young, talented people into the primary sector. Nevil, you're saying that's an area we could be doing much better.
Well, I understand there are some constraints on how many students you can get into these courses, but essentially no one will enter them unless there are good jobs guaranteed. And that's certainly changed a lot. In recent years there's been a bit of a pickup, but salaries is still a key thing too. And I think that we need to see more publicity from the companies that employ these students, talking about their career and that sort of thing. And I know that is happening, and I think the message is getting through.
There have been calls, I know, on the Prime Minister and other political leaders to start promoting agriculture and science as a smart career choice. Is enough being done, Stuart? You're at university, you see students come and go. Are there enough of them who see this as a sort of sexy career option?
Yes, so to keep the job at the university, I'll be cautious in the response. I agree with Neville that they need to raise the salaries. The bit that I really believe in is that the money to be made from agriculture is downstream processing, right? It's not just at the farm gate, it's not just commoditising it, it is the products that come after that, and that's where the profit margins are. And my favourite little example at the moment is Turners and Growers, access to great New Zealand produce, snapped up by a German company that had wonderful distribution channels in Germany and can effectively cream the profit margins over there. I think the type of science people we want are the ones that work in the food processing into the added value area, and as we start to get that right and start to get better prices for that further processed product, that there will be real career prospects. We can do better on the farm, we can sort out the weevils, we can get better produce and grass, we can get some productivity there, we can get some productivity in our breeding and so on. But the real money, to my mind, is to be made from the processing of the agricultural products, and I would like to see a very strong investment in the science of food processing.
Nevil, do you think would it really make a difference if say John Key started saying agriculture is our most important industry? Would we see a shift back, do you think, to students training in those subjects?
Well, I think he's already done most of the platform for this exists, and there's research institutes, there's the Food Innovation Network. I mean, virtually every base is being covered. It's a matter of raising the profile of it. I guess that brings in public support, and people say, yes, there should be more money, state money going in there. And private sector obviously is doing quite well out of it. They are probably being heavily subsidised at the moment. We still have the lowest level of private sector R&D as a percentage of overall investment. And there's certainly in the media where I work, in food industry and that sort of thing, there's plenty of huge good news stories about what is actually being done here. It's just a matter of building up that critical mass.
What about scholarships, that kind of thing? I mean, is that something, and also maybe bonding that people stay in New Zealand?
It was interesting to see a report quoting someone among Polynesian students that they were, when they were being mentored, people were trying to say, don't go for these easy options offered at polytechnics, the hip-hop, that sort of thing. Push these students into the harder courses, and that's one of the problems with the new generation of students. You hear lecturers and academics saying that they really do, it's easier to go into these easy degrees rather than take 5 years to get a science degree. You can understand that, they want a quick payback, but that's not really where the action is. So obviously you need incentives there, and obviously the scholarships is one, and the reward of the job is the other.
So it's not just politicians, teachers should be encouraging pupils into subjects which prepare them for careers in agriculture and, as you say, agriculture and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think government has a role to play when we think of ourselves as a small country, very open country, very reliant on agriculture and tourism, got very little else. I mean, we have a little bit of industry, but not much. That government needs to be saying, well, what are we going to do for the next 25 years? Where are we going to have that long strategic vision? And it has to actively intervene. And if that means putting money into student assistantships and so on, I'm all in favour of it. Showing how old I am, I can remember the old cadetships with Landcorp and Valuation New Zealand as it then was, how we used to train rural valuers and have rural cadets on the land. And these people became the experts, and they became the farmers who are successful people now. And so whatever we were doing in the 60s and 70s and 80s really built the strength and the platform for our strong agricultural produce now. I think we need the vision that says, how do we maximise the money return off this over the next 25 years? And so I'm with Neville. I think we need some intervention in the science area.
And is there a perception problem too that maybe prospective students see agriculture as being only on the farm, working the land, and they don't, as you say, see the opportunities and the potential for careers beyond the farm gate. Is there a perception problem possibly out there as well that agriculture's not for me, when it very well could be?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, in our place at Waikato University, we have science people who do work on cows and other things in agriculture and weevils and grasses and so on, and very valuable work, and we keep them on the other side of Hillcrest Road, and they belong in blocks, and we don't let them out very often. And in the management school we have agribusiness, and we can wear sandals and shoes and behave in a totally different way. Now, do those students enrol in the agribusiness courses with Professor Routh?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. Do our students really want to go over there and be involved and buy a pair of gumboots? I'm not seeing it. Yeah, so I think there's a divide, and that divide needs to be dealt with.
And how do we deal with that? How do we bridge that gap?
Well, I think it's just this clear understanding that the money to be made is in the distribution channels into the markets of end product, and agricultural produce is not end product. And so we need to understand where that is, how we get it there, who are the players there, and get a clearer view of that integrated supply chain, and have the scientists moving the whole way along. I mean, if I said I wanted to irradiate fruit to make it last longer, there's all sorts of problems. We don't want irradiation. We need to deal with a whole series of issues if we're going to drive value add.
From the commercial point of view, there is a structural problem in the food industry in New Zealand. You've got just Fonterra and then the meat companies that have got any scale. The rest of the industry is dominated by overseas multinationals, with the exception of Goodman Fielder. And they're basically only interested in the local market rather than generating wealth in New Zealand. Of course, they have huge research teams overseas. We can lure a few of them here. Pepsi is one that's doing a little bit of research, but that's a big problem for people in positions of power to think about. How can we upscale one of these companies? The Food Awards, for example, had a lot of innovation from very small, almost cottage industry type businesses, but the big companies were not in there at all. And that shows there's really not a lot of work going on at the really critical area where the big money is and where the big salaries are for the scientists.
So it's having vision and investment.
Yes, well, there's got to be some scale in that big gap between all these New Zealand startup type companies and the multinationals who all make about 100 to 200 million, and the Fonterras of the world. We can't be just Fonterra country, is my belief.
More in store after the break, including our guests give their 2 cents worth on TAF, with the crucial vote on trading amongst farmers drawing ever closer. Welcome back to Straight Talk, and my guests Nevil Gibson and Stuart Locke. Let's talk TAF briefly. The vote is coming up, rocking up fast at the end of June. There's been disquiet. Stuart, resistance is futile. What would you say?
Yeah, I think that there's only one word: yes. I think it is futile. If we don't get this sort of trading and an allowance of the expansion of the equity base in Fonterra, we're just not going to go forward. I mean, we moved to the tradable shares, which got the some of the risk off the balance sheet of redemption risk off the balance sheet of Fonterra. We need to go to this stage, and whether they want to say it or not, there has to be further stages, or Fonterra is only the processor of produce in New Zealand. It has to have the money to be able to sell the value-added products offshore. It's got to develop the distribution channels there, because that's where the money is to be made. And when we look at our structure for Fonterra and compare that with, say, Nestle, it's there's probably a good expression for it, but it is really poor, and we just can't go that way. We've got Fonterra, We've got a great opportunity there, and if we want to say, well, we're just going to hang on to it as farmers, then we have to find another way in which to get that produce offshore and add value to New Zealand. If they want to own it and run it, let them, but it's not going to make the real money for New Zealand.
Neville, do you think it's a no-brainer for farmers?
Oh, well, from the outsider's point of view in the business community, they're pretty bemused by what's going on because, as Stuart points out, the real value in Fonterra and exporting from New Zealand is in the brands and that sort of thing. People are desperate for good investments from New Zealand. It appears from the public sort of perception of it that farmers just want to control one thing, and that's the production of milk and a farm gate price, which is basically not going to take anybody anywhere. And so either Fonterra has to split and the farmers keep control of production, but the brands business is where the future is, and people are desperate to invest in that. The whole country is riding on that, and we can't really allow producers per se to control the end. Surely they want to keep the price for themselves, but they're going to get bigger benefits, and that message needs to get through in the longer term.
They can't keep going it alone.
Well, I think the whole structure of it is quite desperate, which is why these schemes are coming in as transitory moves.
Stuart, do you think this could possibly be the beginning of the end of Fonterra as we know it?
Not the end. I think there's going to be some transformations, a transformer there. I think it's got to alter, and I think it has some pathways it can go down. But looking at the farmers, we've already seen the continuing growth of corporate farms, the increasing land price and consolidation of farms. We still might have 10,500 members, but we're getting more and more of the milk production concentrated in the corporate farms. We have to recognise that the whole industry from cow onwards is changing, and if we put up a roadblock here and say no, then I think in 20 years' time there is no Fonterra.
Let's talk field days just while we've got a few minutes left. It's a Waikato institution and has always been a barometer of farmer confidence. What's the forecast this year, do you think, Neville?
Well, obviously the outlook in the Fonterra payment a little bit uncertain. Certainly world commodities are down, but that's not a situation that's necessarily going to last for very long. And if you're looking for further investment, smarter ways of doing things, there's no alternative to field days. So I don't think we'll see too much bad news there. I think it'll be another good year.
Stuart, have we still got some great ideas, great innovation taking place out there, some exciting new ideas?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's stands that are dedicated to this, to new products and innovation, and farmers talking to other farmers from different areas. You get good ideas. I think it's a great networking opportunity. Our dollar's at 75 cents, so our imported capital equipment is going to be more pricey, and our milk prices haven't gone up. So maybe the money's not going to be there as much. Bit of a disappointment, I guess, for the new chief executive of John Calder there for field days. But it's, I think we'll get people in droves as long as the weather's good. And I think that there's, like every year, just huge learning opportunities for farmers and suppliers and purchasers. And we get a good intake into the international lounge of foreign businessmen coming in.
Well, another interesting thing is the sponsorship mix has changed, and there's more and more banks, accountants and people who want to improve the margins and profitability of farming. They see this as a huge opportunity. I notice that they've now got a much higher profile.
I wanted to ask about the international focus or the international element to field days, because time was, it was very much a parochially New Zealand event. That's changed, hasn't it? There's very much more emphasis on the rest of the world coming to town these days.
Very much. I've hosted a couple of Korean people this week, and really interested in our cooperative movements, how they grew up, and the agricultural sector here. In the International Lounge next week out at Mystery Creek, there'll be people from China, but they'll come from South America and Hungary and all over Europe, and you'll find countries that you can't even pronounce the names of. let alone the delegates. And it's just really encouraging to see so many people there mixing because they have an interest in what they might do with our produce if they bought it and shipped it back home.
Still an exciting time to be in agriculture.
It certainly is, and obviously New Zealand technology is sought all around the world, and that's a huge growth area, and that's where overseas investors and local ones want to be involved, and we can build some big global businesses out of that.
Yeah. Should be a big event. This has been Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Thank you very much to my guests, Stuart, Locke and Nevil Gibson, and as always to you at home for watching. If you'd like to get in touch, see the Country 99 TV website for details. I'm Karen McCarthy, back next week with more Straight Talk.